How do you feel about artificial intelligence? I've asked this question to thousands of people from all around the world. And now I'd like to ask you, the audience. So show of hands, who here is an AI optimist? You're thrilled that these tools are here. You think these could benefit society massively, and you're excited to see where all this goes. Let me see some hands for the AI optimists in the crowd. All right. Now, who here is an AI skeptic? You're thinking that the risks here are big. You don't fully trust the companies that are building these tools. All right. Skepticism in the room. And who is somewhere in between? You think the benefits are possible, the risks are real, and if we could just pull everybody back towards this nuanced middle ground, we might be better off. So we have a real range of mindsets in the room, oftentimes sitting right next to each other. And I'm here to tell you that all of these mindsets are unhelpful. They're unhelpful because they're all rooted in a subtle kind of division. I've asked this question on stages, in meetups, and in a community that I created last year called Human Friendly. This community was created to bring people together from across the spectrum of optimism and skepticism about AI for meaningful conversations. And we realized that these conversations would go in a predictable direction depending on who started the conversation. If the optimists started the conversation, they would start to geek out about the newest ChatGPT upgrades. They would talk about their vision of the Star Trek future that is finally possible. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice some people going quiet. These are the skeptics. They're hearing something that they perceive as a sort of blind arrogance. So they'll go quiet and they'll go huddle up with the other skeptics. If the skeptics start the conversation, they'll talk about their concerns. They'll talk about the history of companies coming out with innovations that left people behind. And at first, the optimists wouldn't go quiet. They'd pull out some familiar quote like, AI won't take your job, somebody who knows how to use it will. They're trying to open the mind of the skeptics, and it doesn't work. So they go quiet. Meanwhile, the in-betweeners would maybe play devil's advocate or pick a side or try and get everybody to see each other's perspectives, and it just wouldn't work. This sucks. This is a problem. This is a problem because the stakes are high. But it's hard to tell how high the stakes are by watching the headlines. One day you'll see tech CEOs talking about how their technologies are going to revolutionize society for the better. And then those same CEOs the next day will talk about how we're on the brink of the apocalypse. Meanwhile, commentators will say, don't listen to anything that they say. They're just trying to boost their own companies for their own self-gain. So how are we supposed to decide for ourselves what this moment means for our species? I would like to offer you a framework today that you can use to make up your own mind about what this means and where we might be headed. This framework is based on 3 simple human activities that we've been doing since the dawn of time: how we think, how we decide, and how we create. Let's start with how we think. Optimists will tell you this is great news. Finally, we're free to think about what we want to think about. We can take all the menial tasks, give them to the robots, and free our day-to-day to focus on what matters to us most. The skeptics will tell you, not so fast. Our children in schools aren't even turning in their own work these days. Our colleagues are writing and editing and sending emails using ChatGPT without even reading them themselves. Is this the death of humans thinking for themselves? How we make decisions. Skeptics will tell you that technology tends to amplify our worst flaws as humans. So we have biases, we have shortcuts we take in decision-making, and these will be amplified with AI. A few years ago, Amazon tried to replace part of their hiring process with artificial intelligence. Part of the purpose was to reduce bias in hiring. They scrubbed all mention of gender from job applications. Still, the AI figured out how to systematically discriminate against women candidates. The optimists will tell you that this is an unfortunate outcome to a worthy experiment. And if we keep learning, and if we learn by this example, then eventually AI will be able to augment human decision-making, accommodate for these biases, leading to better decisions being made at all levels of society. How we create. Optimists tell you good news here too. Creative superpowers are being distributed to every corner of the earth. Before, you had to learn for a decade how to be a good writer, how to make visual art. Now you have creative superpowers at your fingertips, and everybody on earth can create sophisticated things, quickly bring them out into the world. This is a dawn of a new creative age. Skeptics aren't so sure. They will tell you that there's something intrinsically valuable about human beings being at the center of our creative work. It was already hard enough for artists and creative entrepreneurs to make a living. This is the final nail in the coffin for these industries. So what world are we living into here? Are we living into the optimist world where we can finally think for ourselves, we can make better decisions, and we all have creative superpowers? Or are we living into the skeptics world where we forget how to think for ourselves, we multiply our worst decisions, and we lose that spark of the human spirit in everything that we create? The second reason that this is a problem, that we're stuck in these unfriendly mindsets, is because your voice belongs in the AI age. When you raised your hand a moment ago to express your mindset about AI, there's something underneath of that. There's a thing under the thing that represents your values, your beliefs, your desires for the world that you want us to be living into. And those desires belong in our future in the age of AI. When we take these positions along a spectrum that cause us to think that we're a polar opposite of somebody else, we push ourselves out of this conversation. And we need you in this conversation. The third reason that this is a problem is that division will be the seed of our destruction. I went to high school in a school that was surrounded by farmland. I was one of the few students of Jewish heritage in that school, and I got cruel jokes about it on a weekly basis. And I would laugh along with these jokes, because that's what teenagers do. This is my great-grandfather. I'm named after this man, Miklos. Miklos grew up in Hungary, what was then Hungary. He fought in World War I, and after the war, his homeland was devastated. His family's fortune had been stolen. His people were suffering from famine. So he traveled around the countryside, reclaiming his family's wealth and saving his family from starvation. But still, he could feel that the division in his homeland was rising, that his neighbors were turning against each other. And this feeling was him sensing something that would eventually evolve into the Holocaust. So he took a 5,000-mile journey across the ocean and went to New York City. And I can only imagine how different the mindsets and the people were there that he met and connected with and did business with from the ones he grew up with. So I feel that I have this deep ancestral message inside of me that our divisions, if we let them rise and grow, will be the seed of our destruction. A few years after high school, I went to work at a high school that was very different from the one that I grew up with in Trenton, New Jersey. This school was almost exclusively Black and Latino students, and one day after class, a group of students came to me and said, "Mr. Rosenberg, are you Jewish?" I said, "My father's Jewish. Why do you ask?" And they said, "That means you're a minority, just like us." So this experience of having my fellow students that I grew up with make fun of me for my differences, and these kids that looked like and felt like they came from very different backgrounds from mine telling me that I was one of them, has always stuck with me. A few years after that, I went and joined my first tech startup that involved me getting on a one-way flight with a 5,000-mile journey across the ocean to move to Nigeria. My job at this tech company was to work with people who were up-and-coming software developers from places like Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, South Africa. And my job in particular was to help them develop the cross-cultural communication skills that they would need to join the global economy and rise as tech leaders in the world. One of the dreams that we held for this work was to help the continent of Africa transition from consumers of technology to creators of technology. So my heritage, my background, my career, all of these things have left in me a deep-seated conviction that while division holds the seed of our destruction, our differences hold the key to our salvation. So in 2023, when AI started to hit the headlines, I was primed to see it through this lens. So I started reaching out to the tech companies who were building these products, using AI to create new innovations and put them out there into the world. I had an agenda. My agenda was to help them get out of that Silicon Valley echo chamber that has caused previous waves of innovation to go the wrong way, and get them to start talking to people around the world of all different mindsets and backgrounds so that they can create tools that work for everybody. I talked to CEOs, I talked to AI engineers, I talked to investors and startups, and I kept talking to other people outside of those circles, at first for research. I talked to artists and parents and educators and organizers and community activists and even retirees about their perspective on AI. And what I found was these conversations were even more interesting and compelling than the ones I was having with the people in these tech companies. And I found that the more I asked this question, the more people thought, oh, I haven't been asked this before. I'm hungry to talk more about this. I'm hungry to connect more around this topic. Because it turns out, when you ask people how they feel about artificial intelligence, their answers are not about technology. Their answers are about humanity. Their answers are about the world that we're living into and the world that we're leaving behind. So I decided to form a community. The people who were reaching out to me, who had growing curiosity, the more I asked them their perspective and connected them with conversations, we formed this community called Human Friendly. And after a month, this community grew small but mighty and spanned more than half the globe. 12 and a half hours of time zones covered with our initial members after just a couple weeks of launching. So we brought people together for these conversations. We hosted connective, meaningful conversations that led people to feel like they were going beyond conversation and connecting with each other and forming relationships. And still, we were hungry for more. So the people in this community asked, can we team up on a project? Can we actually make something out of these conversations? Meanwhile, OpenAI had a grant that they were offering, $100,000 if you could come up with a way that we could get democratic inputs into AI, a way that we could get genuinely broad, inclusive input from people all around the world into the development of these technologies. So bear with me here, because it gets a little bit technical as I describe the solution that we proposed to OpenAI. The first part of it is to go to communities and listen into the conversations that they're already having with their permission for the sake of extracting beliefs from those, surfacing value statements that represent the variety of perspectives in that conversation. Not the top 3 things that the majority of the people in the conversation agree upon, but the true plurality of perspectives, including what a lot of people agree upon and the most key places of divergence within the group. And then we go beyond that. We take these belief statements that we took out of these conversations that are happening, and we turn them into a survey tool. This survey tool is something that you can take to signal your alignment with these beliefs. And this survey tool will give you 2 things. The first, it'll tell you what your mindset is. It'll reflect back to you how you seem to perceive this topic, this moment, and your desires for the future. The second thing it will give you is showing you where you're oriented in this map of human perspectives. It'll show you who else in the community, what mindsets are closest to yours so that you can huddle up with them when you want to, and which ones diverge from yours so that you can go and connect across differences and create things that make the most of those differences. So we put together this application, we designed this whole process, we prototyped it, we got inclusive input from people all over the world from this community, and we submitted our application to OpenAI thinking, this is an incredible solution, I can't wait to try this out. And OpenAI said no. So we built it anyway. We went ahead and created these tools as a community, and we listened to our own conversations that we were having as a community, and we extracted the variety of belief statements that we were hearing amongst ourselves, and then we took the results, and just out of curiosity, I anonymized all the results and gave them to ChatGPT. And I said, ChatGPT, there seem to be 3 groups emerging from this data. We also used a fancy statistical tool called Polis, an open source project that surfaced 3 groups. And I gave them to ChatGPT. And I said, ChatGPT, give me 3 memorable names for these 3 groups. And give me a list explaining where they converge in their beliefs and where they diverge. Do you want to know what the mindsets were? The first of these mindsets is the pioneer. The pioneer often maps to an optimist. Pioneers are thrilled about new technological innovation. They're aware of the risks and the drawbacks of prior innovation, but they see these as solutions in the waiting, problems that if we solve, then we earn the right to keep innovating into a brighter, better future. The second mindset is the guardian. Guardians often map to the skeptics. Guardians believe that there's something essentially valuable about humanity that needs to be protected at all costs. They may support technological innovation, but if it risks putting a threat to what is special about humans and that human essence, then they want to pull the reins and reconsider it. The third group is often mapped to this sort of moderate position, but I believe that it doesn't belong there. These are the navigators. Navigators like to listen to both sides and serve as an integrating role in the conversation. Many people who fall into this category may have been peacemakers in the household growing up. They feel a responsibility to get into the nuances, get into the textures, bring people to the table. These mindsets are not on a spectrum. By identifying with one of them, you are not far away from and other to another mindset. These mindsets are interrelationships. I would even say these mindsets are interdependencies. They rely on each other for us to have a human-friendly future. Where do you see yourself in these mindsets? Where do you see your friends, your neighbors, your family members, your colleagues in these mindsets? I believe that these mindsets and the tools that we use to surface them, and the community that came together to build those tools represent waves on an ocean. And this ocean represents a culture shift that we are ready for. This culture shift involves us breaking away from polarities. It involves us recognizing that we're ready to move beyond a 51% takes all look at the world. We're ready to stand in what we care about, declare to other people, this is how I see the world, this is how I want the future to look, and then say, how about you? And once we get into those conversations, feeling the curiosity build, the hunger build to go further, to develop connections, and maybe even team up on a project that can bring us into a brighter, friendlier future. So my invitation for you is to pick one of these mindsets, or if you'd like, you can come up with a new one that you feel represents your truth and what you really care about and want to see in our new world. And then go out and find somebody else and ask them to do the same. You could say, I am a navigator. This is what it means to me. This is what I want to see. How about you? And once you've done that, once you've stood in your mindset, in your identity, declared to others what you believe in, what you care about, what you want to see in our new world, and you've asked them to do the same, and they've done the same, and you felt this curiosity building, this hunger building to go further, then you will be ready to ask the new question that I discovered by asking that first question 1,000 times. How will we live into a human-friendly future in the age of AI? Thank you.